Hello, my YouTube family. How are you doing? I'm sure you all are doing pretty well, isn't it? Thank you so much. Yeah. And if you have visited this channel first time, let me just give you a small introduction about me. My name is Pramod Shukla, and I'm the founder of Creativity Technologies Private Limited. I'm also holding a position of Senior Vice President at 3 Point Solutions. Another Friday, and I'm back with another conversation with someone very special today. But before I take the name of the guest, I wanted to ask you one question. Is it so easy to relinquish or give up anything? And anyone says yes. Trust me, if anyone says yes, please meet Dr. Paras Arora. He is not only a fighter against the cancer, but an extraordinary, a thought leader at Microsoft, who pretty much spends his days, nights, evenings, and maybe weekends thinking about cybersecurity, thinking about the next big risk that is brought to the organization and how it is impacting the organization, thinking about cloud computing and whatnot. There are so many things. So today we are discussing a lot of things with Dr. Paras Arora, like IT, cloud computing, cybersecurity, Microsoft, hiding at Microsoft, but the most important part, the journey and the fight against the cancer. So please stay tuned, watch this video, and I'm sure your learning will be phenomenal. Thank you so much.
I can feel the blood creeping up from the heathens. Got will, got fight, got pride, got reason. If they wanna go eat, then you know I'm gon' feed them. If you're coming for me, hope you're ready for a demon. I got eyes in the back.
If you have
something for the world would be a better option. I was 12 years old when I was diagnosed with an illness called synovial sarcoma. In common term, we call it as a cancer.
Paras, thank you so much for coming. Okay, it's gonna be my pleasure because my takeaway from this particular interview is gonna be phenomenal because, of course, from your achievement and the journey which you have come across, like long way, we're gonna talk about it. But thank you so much for giving us that nodding to share your journey with us.
In fact, thank you to you for having me here and giving me an opportunity to talk about some of the important topics that we are kind of hearing in the industry. So thanks to you.
Right. So, Paras, at first, about you.
So, I have been into the industry for a little over 18 years now. I have seen, I think, almost every side of the IT, be it from a desktop engineering to a system administration to a database administration, software development, and then finally landing myself into a cybersecurity. So, it has been an exciting journey, I would say, rather, till now. And happy to be here to talk about my journey and some of the experiences that I would be sharing over this.
Right. So my area of focus of this conversation will be more cybersecurity because this is one of the things which I always have in mind, and there's a lot of threats are happening here. So we can talk about cybersecurity. If I ask you just to kick off the discussion here, I would like to ask you one straight question: how important and crucial the concept of cybersecurity is, specifically when you talk about the critical installation in the organization?
So I look at it in a different view. So today, if you look at the organizations, they are not isolated in themselves. Like, for example, they have an interaction system with the consumers. They have an interaction systems with the partners, with the vendors, and then obviously the employees and the human element to it. Now, when we talk about a critical installation, it is again not a very isolated environment. when we talk about a critical installation, a human interaction is there, a business interaction, a machine interaction, a partner ecosystem interaction, consumer interaction. So all those interactions happen with that critical installation today. Now, if we have to kind of put that critical installation into a view, many organizations call that as crown jewels because that's a bread and butter for the organization. But at the same time, if my non-critical installation is impacted by a cyber threat or by an intrusion, and there is a path for me as an intruder to reach to a critical installation, be it whatever focus I put on or the investments that I put onto a critical installation, that will still be at a toss. So what I have seen in my forensics journey, for example, or being an auditor, organization stresses a lot on their core. But when it comes to a non-core installation, that's where they lack the security strategy or the access controls or the implementation of their security posture as well. And that's where the breaches happen the most of the times. I'll take one example if I have to, kind of articulate that. In one of the investigations way back in 2013, 2014 time period, I was working with Verizon at that time. There was a breach that happened in Pune in India. I was one of the investigators in the team and leading that on the ground for the Verizon. And what we realized, the organization was into a kind of a card aggregation system. So they were producing credit cards, debit cards for various banks. They are hosting the systems of the credit card management system or the debit card management system, the payment gateways on their infrastructure where the banks are kind of reusing that infrastructure. They had a setup which was on a Tomcat. It was a development environment. So they had a Tomcat installation there with the default credentials. Because the credentials were default and the setup was exposed over the internet, the setup got compromised.
Okay.
The attacker got a route inside the environment, though to a non-core, but inside the environment. And from there, they started to upload the keyloggers. They started to upload the malwares. They started to scan the entire network. And by doing so, they were able to get to a laptop of a system administrator. They installed the keyloggers there to capture whatever they are typing on the laptop. Everything was getting captured and was getting communicated back to the attacker as well.
Kind of the image they have created?
They installed a software which would kind of run in the background.
Okay.
Nobody would be able to notice it directly. And whatever I will type on my keyboard will be captured with the screenshots. Okay. So even if I am accessing a bank website, let's say, and enter my username and the password there, that will be captured in a clear text and will be transmitted back to an attacker. That Paras accessed this particular website with this username and this password at this time. So for me, it's like a very transparent information of the credentials.
Right.
Now with that information, the attackers further went ahead and got access to a Oracle database system. They got access to the database system, they got access to the credentials, they manipulated the system in a way that if I am a user of a bank, I'll go to an ATM, I'll withdraw 10,000 rupees, but nothing will get deducted from my account. Why? Because there is a script which in the system will reset my amount. So the real money is being taken out, but in the database, the values are kind of overwritten again. And once they did the kind of a check and balance act of the real money, that's when they realized that there is something wrong which is happening in the system. The attackers were there for a good 6 to 7 months of a time, understanding the entire ecosystem, how the payments are flowing. They got access to clear text card numbers. They got access to ATM pins. They printed the ATM cards and siphoned off about $45 million in 3 countries.
Wow.
Right. And a cloning machine cost about 12,000 rupees on Amazon.
Yeah.
And they give about 20 cards as well for you to try and kind of clone the cards as well. So it's cheap to hack today, I would say, But at the same time, if I reflect back on the question that you asked on the critical installation, the critical installation for this organization was a core business or a banking system. The attacker were able to penetrate into the core through a way of or navigating through a development environment which was connected to the production environment and through the system administrator machines as well. The organization was putting so much of a focus on the core. They were getting audited year on year on a payment security standard as well, which is PCI DSS. They were certified on those security standards as well. But since the standard was revolving around the core, they felt they are secure, but in reality they were not. So yes, it is important to focus on the critical installation, but at the same time it is important to have a holistic view of the entire ecosystem, that how my critical installation is being accessed by the humans, by the robots, by the business, by the consumers, everybody.
Okay. So what are some key trends and areas in which we see cybersecurity making an impact over 2022 or 2023? What is your opinion here?
See, if I look at the trend of the cyber attacks, since I was in Verizon, Verizon used to release a data breach investigation report year on year with the statistics of the breaches that has happened in the last year. And these are all confirmed breaches which has been contributed by many organizations to Verizon. And it's a stats only. Now, if I reflect back on the Verizon data breach investigation report of 2021, which has a result of the data breaches that happened in a year 2020, one of the top trends that we see for the breaches that has happened in 2020 were kind of relating back to a denial of service, which was a very low in 2018, topped up in 2021. The second one was around the social engineering. And when we talk about social engineering, I personally have been witnessing this since 2010. Every year in the data breach investigation report, a social engineering continue to occupy a space, and that too at the top 5 or a top 3 positions. So we continue to see these trends year on year. If I talk about a next year, for example, a year 2023 or 2024, how it would look like, I think the social engineering would continue to be a cause of concern. That's one. Second, there's a lot of focus which is today is on the cloud. And with the cloud, if you look at the capabilities, it has everything. You have the IoT enabled capabilities there, you have AI capabilities there, you have your hosting websites capabilities there, infrastructure is hosted there, and a lot of organizations are intentionally moving towards the cloud as well. So 2023, I think there's going to be a good focus on the cloud as well, from both offensive and the defensive strategy standpoint. The attacks on the cloud would increase, is what I believe, and denial of service would continue to be one of the major threats for the industry, and social engineering would continue to occupy a space, with the focus on the AI as well. Why? Because there's a lot of automation which is happening in the businesses today, and with AI consuming a space there, that's one of the opportunity areas for the offenders as well to evaluate and to explore more. And some of the offenders are excited because of the monetary benefits, but some of the offenders take it as a challenge as well. So people who loves challenge and are offenders, they would continue to focus on the AI as well.
Well, this is something which is making very anxious, because if it will go at the national level as well, it's not talking about the
Yes, absolutely.
Exactly. So you already talk about some of the threats here, but if I ask you, what do you see as top threats right now, and what are some of the emerging risks you forecast?
See, top threats, if I look today, one of the areas where industry need to focus is on the education and the awareness of the people who are handling that infrastructure, which is core or non-core to the business. I'll take one more example. There was a breach that I was investigating, and the the organization had everything in place from a technology standpoint, from a policy standpoint. You talk about a technology, they would have it. So a lot of good spend they had at that point in time, they had done on the infrastructure. But when it comes to an awareness, that was an opportunity area for the organization. The reason I say so, the administrators were there, the breach happened, we were investigating a case, we kind of interviewing a gentleman there who was a network administrator. And the question was, when was the last time that you reviewed the logs in your environment? And he said 6 months back.
6 months back.
And we asked why. And the response was, we implemented a new technology, which I don't know how to operate. There was a vendor team who came, they installed it, they gave a KT, but then that KT was just a tick on the box. And they just went off. After that, nobody knew how to operate that technology. So we know that the technology is there, the dashboards are there, logs are being collected, but I don't know how to look at those logs. When we kind of logged into that environment, we realized that the logs were crying like anything. They were crying like there are malwares, they are crying there are keyloggers, they are crying there is a system intrusion that has happened, somebody is accessing your Windows environment, but then nobody was there to look up to it. Right? So that was one of the challenge that I see. The second threat I see is many times the organization outsource the services to the vendor, believing that the responsibility is also outsourced and the accountability as well, which never happens. I'll take another example. There's a big service sector organization. It's a global organization, and they were having a contract with an organization to remotely log into the environment and review their Windows and the Linux installation and manage the changes, be it a user creation, be it a software installation. They were entitled and responsible to manage those operational tasks.
So do you mean that they have the complete access to their Active Directory administration, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Now, when the breach happened, we chose some sample systems. We logged into the environment and we realized that this organization never ever logged into the environment. And they had the usernames with the password never expire. And the passwords were, I can't reveal, but it's one of the top 100 vulnerable passwords which were available on the Google. So that's the nature of the vendor ecosystem. Unfortunately, nobody in this organization also attempted to review what the vendor is doing. Why? Because the vendor is a big name, right? So that's a second opportunity that I see as an opportunity and the threat as well, because the vendor ecosystem today is vulnerable as well, and something that we have witnessed in the targets attack as well. There was the vendor itself was targeted, and through the vendor environment, the threat kind of percolated down to the target data center, and that's where 20 gigs of the data went out. So vendor ecosystem, managing that vendor ecosystem and monitoring capabilities is continuing to be one of the major areas that organizations should focus upon. The other threat that I see from an industry standpoint is how they can recover from a breach. Breaches will continue to happen, and that's a truth. So no industry is immune, no individual for that matter is immune to the threats as well. But it is important to have the recovery strategies implemented and tested as well. There was, I'll share an example of the Microsoft itself. There was an organization who was doing a DR exercise, like a preparedness. And what they realized during a DR exercise, so they had a load balancer, primary and a DR load balancer. The primary load balancer released all the IPs to be handed over to the secondary installation. The secondary installation never got it. Now they are in a situation where primary doesn't have an access from the internet, secondary doesn't have an access from the internet, and all their business applications are down because nobody has an IP in the organization and their IPs are lost, right? So though it's not a confidentiality breach, it's not an integrity breach, but it definitely affected the availability of the business application, and that's one of the third triad that we continue to see in the security. So I think it is important for organization to continuously test, evolve and mature their disaster recovery strategies and the recovery policies or the implementations as well. And they should also monitor it holistically along with their primary installation. Many a time organization neglect their secondary installation or the DR installation, believing that it would kick in when the need arise. But when the need really arise, if that DR is not up to a mark, that would allow the attacker to have internal access to the organization as well. So it has to be valued equally as a primary installation, and that's where I think that's one of the threats from an industry standpoint that would be there.
Okay. In a very layman terms, I'm going to ask you one thing. How secure these payment gates are? Like when we are doing a lot of transactions, right?
Yes.
So sometimes I get insecure when I'm just logging into any random website and they are taking me to the payment gateway. I get scared. Like, should I put my information there or not?
See, to complete the transaction, we should obviously, the payment gateway is one of the method for us to interact with the business system. And if you look at India, we are around 300 billion transactions in a digital economy is what we are doing as of the last financial year. Now, when we talk about payment gateway, there is a necessary to be scared. Absolutely. Some of the things that we as an end user should be aware about is look at the URL. Do you really trust the organization, or have you seen that URL before or not? Payment gateway never asks for an ATM pin. They always ask for a CVV, which is a card validation value.
Right.
So they ask for that 3-digit or a 4-digit number that needs to be entered on the page. In one of the attacks, the attacker were able to modify the payment gateway landing page, and rather than asking CVV, they changed the field to asking a user on the ATM pin. The users believed that it's a legitimate ask, it's something which is being done by the bank for the security of their data, and innocently they entered that information there. Right? Now, look at a situation where you have a card number as an attacker, you have an expiration date, that's what you feed on the payment gateway, you have a name which goes in there, and you are entering an ATM pin. I can easily capture that information if I am with a malintention. I can easily capture that information, get a kind of a card printed for me and make a transaction there. Now, as a user, I should be aware that ATM pins are never asked by the bank. Be it a payment gateway, be it a phone call or an IVR call, ATM pins are never asked by the bank. And they kind of educate the consumers as well over the SMSs, over the emails, but we tend to ignore those SMSs as well. So I think as a user, payment gateways are secure to an extent that the person who is doing a transaction is aware about the fields which are being captured in the transaction.
Okay, I'm just giving you, before I ask you another question, I have the data to share with you. The attack on Oil India Limited in April 2022, and the demanded was 7.5 million US dollars. If we talk about the Mental Health Institute in Bangalore, I will not take the name, faced a ransomware attack in March 2022. If you talk about in Pune, the government sector, municipal corporation Smart City in Pune was attacked and lost 5 crores. Okay, so I want to understand, we are talking about cybersecurity all the time, but still, the kind of infrastructure we have, the kind of equipments we have, are we still confident about these equipments, or we are still thinking what to be done?
See, security is a ever-evolving field. And when we talk about threats, when we talk about vulnerabilities, we often talk about 0 days as well. And 0 days is something which has never been witnessed by industry. So it's a kind of malware or a way to intrude into a system for which the vaccine is not there. It's like a COVID-19. So now when that situation arises, no system is secure. At least the system on which the zero-day vulnerability is there, that system itself is not secure. How do we kind of build a trust on those systems is by having a defense in depth kind of an approach, where we can delay an attack. We can't really avert an attack, but we can delay that attack to happen or to reach to my target system. How do we do it? By, let's say, putting in honeypots. Honeypots are nothing but a system which lure an attacker to towards it, and then you monitor the activity of the attacker onto it to build onto your implementation, and you can fix those gaps onto your installation as well. So that's one of the area I think where the organizations can invest upon to build more confidence on their security ecosystem. The second area is to have much more robust monitoring capabilities by implementing SOC, for example, which is a Security Operations Center. Now these Security Operations Center are kind of monitored, actioned, audited by the individuals itself. So it is important to bring in the AI feature as well into these SOCs to kind of automate some of the tasks which are being done by the humans today. Now, when we talk about SOC, it also depends, kind of correlates back to the awareness as well. So people who are operating these security operation centers should be continuously upskilled as well, because the technology is changing, the tools are changing, the threats are changing as well every now and then. So the individuals who are in the security operations center should also be upskilled on a regular basis. They should be educated on the upcoming or kind of industry scene threats as well, so that they can react and respond to those threats effectively.
Okay.
So I think these are some of the areas where the organizations can focus to gain more confidence on their installation. But like I said, it is not 100% foolproof. The attacks can still happen.
It's about like, I want to ask you one thing here. At a like national level, right? If you talk about the cybersecurity system we have here, I was in one of the groups discussion, and they were saying that now the war will happen on computer, not with missiles, right? So I'm not sure like how secure we are in terms of this cybersecurity or cyberspace part at a national level.
So at a national level, I would say we are. So if you look at a UN report on the state of cybersecurity for different countries, India is ranked 10th, much ahead of China and Pakistan, from a kind of a portfolio or the competency from a cybersecurity standpoint or a cyber infrastructure standpoint. Are we good? The answer is no. There's still a road to catch. For example, we have a lot of states who have the security operations centers within India. So they monitor their critical infrastructure, they monitor the national or the state level infrastructure there. But then many states, they do not have that infrastructure as well, or they do not have that security operations center to monitor what is happening on their IP network.
Right.
Even if they have, for example, in my opinion, we should have one consolidated center level feed system where everything kind of comes and people can visualize what is happening in which state and which state is under a much more threat than the other one, so that the reaction and the response can happen accordingly. So I think India is doing fairly well, but still a road to catch. I would say we have a national security policy draft as well, which is available, but is it foolproof? The answer is no. We still need a much more holistic framework. We still need much more larger and wider security architecture as a country to be implemented. And that's what the purpose of certain or the DSCI kind of an organizations, they have a very critical role to play in there as well.
Okay, since you talk about China, so China is the biggest threat to India when it comes to the cybersecurity part. So is there any changes in the strategy or policy we are making, or any thought process we have from the cybersecurity standpoint?
So I think, so if you look at, for example, if you talk about numbers, APAC, for example, has witnessed about 5,000 plus security incidents
Yes.
last year,
Yeah.
out of which about 1,400 something were the confirmed breaches. North America, on the other side, put together has witnessed more than 13,000 security incidents, out of which 1,000 plus were the confirmed data leakages. EMEA was much more lower in number. Now, from an India standpoint, if I talk about, we have a very strong defensive mechanisms in place. But when we talk about a defense is not always about being defensive. Sometimes it is also being offensive as well. And that's where I think India needs to invest upon. If you look at the last budget, which has been passed by the government of India, they have kind of put together 500 plus billion rupees for the investment on the cyber architecture as well, or the cyber spend. How much of it gets consumed, I don't know, that's a time to test. But having said so, I think the opportunity is there to improve on the offensive side of the response, as well as mature more on the defensive side of it. And while you talk about China, I think the threat is across region itself. It's not only China predominantly. We have a threat from Pakistan as well, for example. But at the same time, how well we are prepared in our cyber military defense and the offense is something which would result in a much more robust, I would say, security strategy as a nation put together.
Why I'm talking about China here, because during this COVID time, I got the data that almost 7 million attempts happened to healthcare industry to get the data that what is happening in India. And I don't know whether they got the data or not, but it was a 7 million attack to healthcare industry. So how secure the information would be put on the healthcare system when it comes to the population of India?
So I'll tell you, if you look at a credit card record which is being sold on the dark web,
Right.
it gets sold off for $5 record, $6 per record. When we talk about a healthcare data being sold onto a dark web, it costs somewhere between $15 to $20 and sometimes $25 as well per record, which means the healthcare is one of the topmost sector for the attackers to focus on. And why so? Because healthcare is obviously financially rich sector, and secondly, it is also something which can be targeted to an individual as well. Because, for example, if I am facing some illness, I may not be willing to share that publicly.
Right.
So I can be kind of put under a pressure or kind of bargain mode. When it comes to a larger healthcare sector data, a complete nation can be put under a stress as well. Like you talked about COVID-19 numbers, right? The entire healthcare data numbers, for example, if goes into a public domain or kind of leaked out in a public domain, the image of the nation can also be damaged, and that's what is kind of an attractive factor for the attackers as well, right? So having said so, healthcare industry is focusing on the building much more defenses against the cyber threats and the risks as well. But I would say the systems are not robust as we speak today, and there's a lot more to be done in the healthcare sector from a security standpoint. They have IoT enabled machines like the radioactive machines or the imaging systems, which kind of connect back on the IP network, which puts the data or the scans in the IT system or in the databases. And consider a situation where the OT network is compromised, where any image of a patient which is being sent across to an IP network that is getting captured or kind of manipulated in between, it can cause a disaster to a human life and as well as to the repute of the healthcare industry or that company itself. Now, the healthcare sector has to do a lot more in terms of the implementation of the security strategy. Why? Because they are dealing with two different type of technologies. It's not only IT, it's not only OT, it's a mix of both. So they have to do a lot more in this sector, and micro segmentation and segmentation is something that they can invest upon, where they can isolate certain degree of a network into multiple zones and then build a zero trust network in across those multiple zones, so that any communication which is happening between two untrusted zone has to pass through kind of a litmus check to make sure that the access is valid and there's no I would say modification which has been done in the transmission.
Okay. So you were talking about the AI part, and this is a very interesting area which I am focusing right now. Do you also believe that there will be a huge job cut due to AI? Because if you talk about manufacturing industry, robotics and RPN are taking process, right? If you talk about other industry like office admin, CRM, customer care, all these are like chatbots are taking. So if you see IT industry 5 years, 10 years down the line, do you also believe that there will be a huge job cut in software engineering as well?
I don't think so. And the reason I say so is, if you reflect back when the computers started, everybody believed that it will result in a job cut. Why? Because there was a fear that the computers would take over the jobs of the humans. Then AI came in, or for example, the cloud came in, a lot of automation is happening. I think the focus would shift from doing operational duties or the work or the actions to be more innovative, is what I believe. So there would not be job cuts, but rather the jobs would be much more agile and different, in a way where the humans would be needed to focus on what next in the industry.
But if you talk about blue collar people, right, they are working in a manufacturing industry, in the plant area, how they gonna grow in their life? Because if machines and robotics are taking place and just removing the manpower, what they gonna do? Because if you see almost 3 million job, I'm talking about the report which I got from McKinsey, they said 3 million jobs will be cut by 2022 at the end, from the manufacturing standpoint.
So let me share you an instance of a manufacturing industry. So I happened to visit one of the manufacturing plant for a furniture in Nagpur, and the plant is obviously very huge. There are robotic arms which picks up the ply, puts it on the conveyor belt, and all the cutting and designing, everything is taken care by the machine. What the humans are intended for is to design those designs. The humans are there to do a quality checks. The humans are there to make sure that the processes or the machines are working fine. A machine cannot check another machine whether they are working fine or not. To a certain degree they can, from a temperature level control, from a humidity level control, but whether there is an accuracy of the work being done, how is a new design would look like, is something which a human can decide, not a machine.
But Paras, how many people we get? Take an example, like if today we need 100 people.
Yes.
Machine came into the picture, we will need only 20 people.
Yes.
Because the things which you're talking about, of course, this is going to be a skill job. You can't be just like a layman man. To handle that kind of quality part, you have to be a certain skills available.
Correct.
And that machine cannot do.
Yes.
Right? In order to get up to that level, you have to earn something. But
Yes.
at the talk about people who were like doing the packaging work, people who were just doing the wrapping work, what they're going to do?
So, if you talk about the work which is kind of replacing the humans,
Right.
look at the industry. The industries are going to grow even more. With the automation in place, the capacity would increase.
Right.
With more demand, more opportunities in the manufacturing industries would evolve even more. It may happen that the more manufacturing units are being established then.
Right.
It may happen that these people who are now kind of rudimentary in their job, they get an opportunity to upskill themselves and be a perfect fit for a new role as well. So it's never about a job loss. It's always about how relevant you are to the need of the changing phase of the time. if I continue to be, let's say, on the Windows environment, and I don't implement Linux in my kind of a skill set, or if I don't learn Linux as a skill set, I would be stagnant, right? Microsoft always was always believed to be a Windows kind of an environment, right? We all know Microsoft because of the Microsoft Windows. If you look at Azure, they have a Linux installation. They are supporting Linux as well now. We have a team of Linux engineers supporting the Linux as a operating system on Microsoft Azure. Why? Because we have to change ourselves along with the time. We can't remain a Microsoft Windows kind of an organization. We have to change. And that's not only applicable at an organization level, but also at an individual level. If I don't improve my skill, if I don't add value to myself so that I am relevant to the industry, then absolutely there is a threat. But if I change my skill, if I am intentional about being relevant, then absolutely I would not face a job threat from the industry.
Maybe from that standpoint, the educational system will become more mature.
Yes.
To give more opportunity like this.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So now I'm coming to a very interesting part here. Okay. Your engagement with Microsoft, because see, Google, Microsoft, SAP Labs, these are the dream companies to work with, right? And many of them have this kind of dream to join Microsoft. But before that, I just want to understand, what is your engagement at Microsoft right now?
See, at Microsoft, I am looking at Microsoft Azure as the offering from a support standpoint. Now, it is interesting in a way because it allows me to continue my passion of being closer to the customer.
Okay.
So if you look at my experience, I think about 17 years is what I was in a customer facing role in a different shapes and forms. Now with Microsoft, it allows me to have that same flavor, that same feel, but with a different purpose. Now and my belief is, if I don't know the technology, I would not be able to secure it.
Right.
I started my career as a desktop engineer, grew into a system administrator, then into a software developer, then somebody who is at an architect level working, and then moved into a cybersecurity as a focused field. And within security as well, if you look at my journey, I have been an auditor, being an investigator. I have been on a delivery side of the operations as well. I have been on a sales side of it as well. So different perspectives of the security as well. What that allows me to look at a particular problem from a kind of a dimensional view, and then come to a solution which probably would be a best match to a problem. Now in cloud or in Microsoft, for example, my experience before joining Microsoft on the cloud was very limited. And that's where I wanted to gain more experience, more knowledge on the cloud before I kind of move into a security focused field of the cloud.
So I have a question, like when you joined Microsoft, did you join directly on the cloud side, Azure cloud
Yes.
side, or like how did this happen? Because you were into cybersecurity, right?
Yes.
So how this transition happened?
So I think that's an interesting one. See, this transition happened, I joined Microsoft based on the experience that I was carrying of the technology. During my interaction with the hiring manager at Microsoft, I was open enough to say that I don't know cloud. Right? It is always about, in Microsoft, for example, if I talk about, in Microsoft, it is always about an attitude of an individual. Knowledge and skills is something that we believe we can add on.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But if a person doesn't have a right attitude to learn, or doesn't have an attitude of owning up a particular thing, then that's a problem area, right? If you look at my past history, every year I used to do one certification, just to be relevant to the industry, and
Right.
that has been like a track for me. So till date, I have roughly about 18 certifications to my name
Wow.
in different
Alright.
fields.
Okay.
Now, when this interview of Microsoft happened, the questions were largely around, okay, you don't know the cloud, which is fine, but what would you do to learn cloud? What would be your approach once you are in Microsoft? Let's say, what would be your approach to grow in the cloud field? So that was more of a conversation which was happening in the discussion.
The theme of this channel is to help all the freshers and a lot of experienced people. They want to switch or they want to migrate to cloud computing or cybersecurity. So I will definitely gonna ask you a few questions about it.
Sure.
So Microsoft is a dream company of a lot of people. So what recommendation you can tell the freshers? What kind of preparation they have to do? What kind of skills they have to step into IT industry or experienced people to step into Microsoft?
So I think it all depends on their interest area. Microsoft or Google or Apple, they are like big organizations and they have variety of roles to offer. If somebody is interested to join the organizations at this stage, the only piece of advice is to be confident in what they are doing. So if I am a desktop engineer and I'm good at it, I know what I'm doing, there's a position in Microsoft, Apple, Google, everywhere. If you are good in a security, if you are good, you are confident on your experience, you have a position in Microsoft. But the only expectation is that you should have a right attitude to learn and to share your knowledge as well. One of the important things in the bigger organization is how well you collaborate across different cultures, across different regions. If you are self-centric, for example, as an approach of an individual, you would not get an entry into the organization because it's a cultural amalgamation that happens. So you have to sometime work with a US, sometime you're working with APAC, sometime you're working with EMEA. So different cultures, different people, different perspectives. And if you are not confident, if you are not open to sharing your experiences or to bring in your own individual perspective, then you don't have a position there. So I think it is important to be open, to be inclusive, and also at the same time be confident on whatever you're doing right now. That's going to be the key. For the experienced professionals, for the newbies who want to grow in the organization, I would say be yourself during the discussion. Be open and showcase that you're adaptable to the new culture of the organization as well. Because if you are new, people expect you to be trained on the processes, on the technologies of these organizations. So the only element that they watch out in the discussions or the interviews are that how confident you are, how candid you are, and at the same time how eager you are to learn and implement the new technologies or the processes that is being offered by the organization. So I think that's going to be the mantra.
So when you talk about a cybersecurity part, so do they have to have any kind of programming skills, like, or especially if you talk about the scripting languages, if you talk about Perl, Ruby on Rails, and shell scripting, is it required to have?
It is good to have, not a need. So from a cybersecurity standpoint, people expect you to be aware on the security standards, be clear on the concepts, why security and what is all about security is what you know. Different phases of security you should be aware as a fresher, and you should have a keen interest in growing into a security field. As an experienced individual, if you are coming from a development background, then obviously people expect you to be more agile in the way of learning. People expect you to be more aware on the scripting languages, for example, as well, from an automation standpoint, or from doing a lot of stuff programmatically than doing it manually. So yes, depends on the person to person.
Are you hiring anybody right now? Like
A lot.
what kind of people you are hiring right now?
Experienced as well as freshers, both are welcome. And when we talk about the experienced one, we expect people to defend their own CVs. If I have written down that I know Linux, then I should know Linux. And if I am a fresher, then I expect a person to be very open in the conversation. Rather than reactive, be proactive.
Okay.
So
skills-wise, what you are looking for?
From a experienced professionals, we expect people to know the technology, be it, let's say, a Windows operating system, Azure directory, be it on a Linux platform, for example, how the clusters work, how Linux operating system user creation works, how encryption works at a concept level. Then a next step would be whether they have worked on those areas in the past or not. If they have not worked, they should not document that in the CV.
Yeah.
If they have worked, confidently write that in the CV and present it to the interviewer. But we have a lot of openings today across the Microsoft. Microsoft is going big on the gaming platforms as well, so a lot of developer level opportunities are there. With the developer opportunities, they are going big on the support side of it, so a lot of infrastructure support related requirements are there. At the same time, they have a lot of project managers need, they have a program managers need, a lot of other opportunities.
So since you're there on LinkedIn as well,
Yeah.
like, and of course I'm gonna highlight this part on LinkedIn. So are you open to have a LinkedIn request, people who would like to step into the Microsoft part, what kind of requirement you have? So you're gonna entertain them on
Oh,
LinkedIn?
absolutely. Because see, LinkedIn is kind of a channel for us as well to identify and attract the right talent. So
Right.
if somebody is interested, they can obviously connect with me over the LinkedIn and I can have a conversation with them.
Right. Okay. We have pretty much discussed all those things here. One thing I just wanted to talk about and the challenges which you have faced in your life. Would you like to talk about that things that happened?
Absolutely. So I was 12 years old when I was diagnosed with an illness called synovial sarcoma. In common term, we call it as a cancer. So it affected my right knee, and I got operated 5 times for that illness, but it was recurring. And finally, in 2001, I got rid of it with the doctor suggesting to go for a complete hip disarticulation. It happened in 2001. I was in a 12th standard at that time. It was a challenge, obviously, for me to look at life from a different perspective. I was very fascinated, like other Indians. I was very fascinated of cricket. Now, I wasn't able to play the cricket, but I can watch cricket, right? But what that resulted in is, today if I reflect back and realize, that resulted in giving me more patience. That resulted in my, I would say, inclination towards an art. And with the art, I was able to think through a lot of things with a lot of detail. I was able to pen down my thoughts nicely on the presentations. I was able to articulate better in front of the customers. I was able to look at the problem from an artistic point of view, to think out of the box, how this problem can be solved in a different way. Right? So obviously there was a challenge, but at the same time there was a benefit as well, with me thinking in a different way. I think it's so the learning that I have taken is the capabilities that we have is something that we control from our thoughts, and the limit is endless to it. There is no end to it. Today when we talk about IT, it's mostly a sitting job that we do. So till the time I am able to think and transfer that thought to a computer, be it by the way of typing or be it by the way of thinking and then translating those into a computer language, I think I'm good with it.
But if I retrospect, if I go back a little bit, I want to understand the mindset. You were like, you wanted to play cricket and you were doing all the activities your group was doing, right? All of a sudden, when you woke up and that extraction happened, how did you handle that mindset that you lost something? Because we cry all the time, we don't have this, we don't have that, but still you have a chance to retrieve it. But here is a different case altogether.
Yes. I think there was a lot of contribution by my friends, by my family members as well. And when we talk about, today we are talking about diversity and inclusion, right? This was a concept that I learned in 2001 with my friends acting no different to me. If they are going to watch a movie, I am being invited there. If they are going to have a coffee or a chow-mein on a daily street, I was part of those breakouts as well. So I think I was blessed to have those friends. I was blessed to have the mindset of that family members as well, who supported me at that time. And I think anybody who is going through a tough or a rough patch in their life, if they have a support of their family and the friends, that's like a boon to them, right? And what that allows is a distraction of your thoughts from thinking that you are not so capable of doing something. When somebody is inviting you to be a part of something that they are doing naturally, I think it's just a thought that you can just think about. But I would say it doesn't impact you if your friends and family are there to support you.
Okay. So did you ever feel that you are? This is a very sensitive part, and I don't know how to frame it, but I'm going to be very straightforward
Yes.
here. Did you feel like they are doing sympathy sometimes, or you feel that why they are doing it, some kind of support, or you feel that no, I
No.
don't need that part?
No, I think sometimes it do happen because that's natural.
Right.
Right, so sometimes that feeling does crop in to an individual that people are being sympathetic
Yeah.
towards you. The best thing at that time is to listen to music,
Right.
and that's what I did. I didn't had a luxury of a YouTube at that time or Apple Music at that time, but then watching movies with the friends was something which helped me a lot. And we still are connected with each other. They live in Delhi, somebody lives in US, somebody is in Sweden. We are still connected by the way of technology today, but at that point in time, they used to come to my house, we used to watch movies together, spend time. And whenever this thought used to come to my mind that they are being sympathetic, I think being open and discussing that helps.
Very nice.
Rather than keeping that thought within you and then being kind of assuming things differently, it's better to discuss those things out.
Now I'm very glad that you have such a nice group. You're blessed.
Absolutely.
Right. Okay. So now we talk about everything. We talk about you. I am gonna play my rapid fire with you. Okay.
Sure.
And I always do that. This is my interesting part. So, if you have to take an interview, whom you will choose? Bill Gates, Sundar Pichai, Elon Musk, or Jack Ma?
I would go with Elon Musk. And the reason for choosing him is, see, he leads a conglomerate.
Right.
He has a lot of businesses
Right.
under his name. Irrespective of the result or an outcome of an interview, there would be an opportunity to learn from him about different perspectives, different businesses that he learns,
Right. He's into so many
different
other
challenges. So yes,
Okay.
Elon Musk would be the answer.
things. Okay. One day you want to wake up as?
A billionaire.
Okay. So, biggest fear?
Biggest fear is probably a day when I don't have a goal in my life. That's a fear for me. If I look at my day and if I don't have a task list, for example, to my day, I get a little jittery.
Okay.
Right. So biggest fear is a life without a goal.
Right. Absolutely. A night out with friends or coffee with yourself?
Night out with friends, not too often though. Coffee would obviously be welcome.
Okay. Okay. A dinner with Bill Gates or with top world-class hacker?
A dinner with the Bill Gates.
Why not hacker? Because that will give you a lot of opportunity to learn more about their mindset, isn't it?
So I myself have been a hacker at some point in time as well.
Okay.
But an opportunity to meet with Bill Gates and design something for the world would be a better option.
Very well done. Very strategic. Okay. So we are pretty much done here, Paras. Before we conclude this conversation, I want you to close this conversation with a very strong message for freshers or experienced people.
So one message that I have is, and I personally follow that as well, irrespective of your experience, irrespective of what you do, what you have been doing, what's your experience, it is important to think what you can do differently. If you, and that's something that I have learned, I have heard, I have practiced as well, it is important to keep walking.
Keep walking.
If you can't run, walk. If you can't walk, scroll or crawl. If you can't crawl, take somebody's else's help to reach to the goal post. But then by all means keep walking, because that'll keep you motivated and that'll make sure that your goal is about to be achieved. So
Thank you
it is
so
important
much.
to walk.
Paras, I must say that it was a very candid, very informative discussion I had, and I have a small gesture. Whenever we have a guest, we have a small thing for them. So I would like you to join me. So guys, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you so much for watching this video. I'm sure this is going to be a lot of learning for you as well. And of course, don't forget to reach out Paras Arora on LinkedIn. Definitely, it's going to be a huge information you will get. Of course, he has a lot of positions open, so I'm sure he's going to help you out. Till then, see you. I will see you in the next episode.